class on Zephaniah that you signed up for.
Wait a minute.
We've been all over the place, right?
Yeah.
In this study of Isaiah.
Exactly.
And the way we've been studying Isaiah, I think this is the proper way to study the Bible. I really felt an advancement in my own personal knowledge when we started checking cross-references. Before that, now, granted, I was a teenager, almost junior high age type stuff, when I wasn't checking cross-references. But when I did, I think this is the way to go. I think this is how you get the full, complete picture, start comparing stuff, because some parts of it that say the same thing are real easy to understand, other parts not as easy, and you can link them. We have been slugging our way through all of the holidays and Fifth Wednesday singing, all of that. We've been slugging our way through the most important part of the book, 13 and 14, as it pertains to if you're going to be studying the book of Revelation. And what I've tried to do, hopefully have at least put the thought in your head that, hey, this might not be literal Babylon. The three different theories, really the two different theories, and then there's my theory. The two different theories are it's talking about Babylon in 539 BC. The NIV Study Bible says it's really talking about Assyria there in the late 7th century BC, which that one fits a lot better than Babylon 539 BC, but it's still, there's still some things that just flat out don't happen with that one. But I'm saying that it's really this figurative Babylon, that it's Jerusalem first century when Christ would come. That Isaiah is talking about Judah and Jerusalem, Isaiah 1:1. That Isaiah is the messianic prophet. He's concerned with things that happened in the first century AD, the messianic times. And so what I've done is said, okay, this doesn't happen to literal Babylon. Doesn't happen, right? Does happen to Jerusalem. Does happen to Jerusalem. And you can do all the cross references, check history, whatever. We're going to double that. Because what I'm going to do today is we're going to spend the entire time on the book of Zephaniah. Now, how many of us in here have grown up as members of the church, experts on the book of Zephaniah? If you raise your hand, you're a liar. Right? It's just a book we never once went to other than maybe some weird reason somebody wanted to read a verse out of it for something. Okay?
When you go through the whole Bible to read.
When you go through the whole Bible to read.
Really quick.
Okay, no idea. Next.
Was he anybody?
So we're gonna get into this Zephaniah a little bit, and I want you to see how it is. This is my terminology. I like to say when the cross references are so closely linked. This is a cut and paste of Isaiah 13 and 14. Zephaniah is a little less metaphorical. He's a little less mystery, the mystical Babylon. He's less of that. And he's just straight up in the face of the Jews. And we'll read that here in a second. But just to give you the background on him, he is prophesying about 100 years after Isaiah. All right, you're getting very close to the fall of the Assyrian Empire. You're getting very close to Judah going into Babylonian captivity. You're at a very short amount of time before these things happen, within a generation here, when Zephaniah is writing his stuff. I made this chart here, and I was just going to flash through it, but I've been told 15 times, slow down. I was just going to put this in gray and let y'all go home and study it. I've completely changed my mind. I didn't change the slide any, so I don't have each verse listed out and slide. So we're going to be on this slide for a little bit, and what we're going to do is I'm going to have Kevin read the Zephaniah verse out of the King James, and I'm going to have Tom read the corresponding Isaiah verses. And they're both going to be out of King James, so the language should be the same. I want you to hear how they're saying the exact same thing. Okay? It's not word for word on every single one, but you will come out of here and be like, Zephaniah is Isaiah 13 and 14. Zephaniah is 3 chapters. And then at the end, I'm going to go through the last few verses of the book and of Zephaniah and kind of show you, look, this is messianic. This is Christian age that this thing is talking about. Because I think Zephaniah also has a lot of this type, anti-type qualities to it. Who is the target? Kevin, will you read verses 2 through 4?
Verses 2 through 4. I will utterly consume all things from off the land, saith the Lord. I will consume man and beast. I will consume the fowls of the heaven and the fishes of the sea and the stumbling blocks with the wicked, and I will cut off man from off the land, saith the Lord. I will stretch out mine hand upon Judah and upon all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will cut off the remnant of Baal from this place, and the name of the Chimerans with the priests.
Who's the target? This will be the Jerusalem, right? The Jews. It's clear. It's not Israel. They're gone. It's clear. It's straight up in their face. I'm going to destroy everything from the land. I'm going to cut you off. Judah, Jerusalem. Now, let's read the metaphorical Babylon one. Who's the target? Read 13:1, 14:4.
13:1, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. And then
14:4.
That thou shalt take up the proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased?
Okay. So here are your two things that we're comparing. Now these don't say the same thing. This is the introduction of who the targets are. Okay? Zephaniah is saying Judah and Jerusalem. He's going after them almost every verse. There's a couple of verses in chapter 2 that he's not. He's talking about also enemies of God, other nations. But then he gets right back into it in chapter 3. And we're mostly in chapter 1 and chapter 3 today.
I find Zephaniah, the passage you just read is really interesting to me because it also predicts the removal of idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an interesting thing to that that's not related to what you're doing, but there's if you're somebody that's interested in like what happened with the way that things were before and after Christ relative to like idol worship, it's really quite different.
Yeah, definitely another study, but right, the idol, and a lot of times when this kind of stuff is read, if it's ever read in a lesson or sermon,
Yeah.
that is what they talk about. Don't worship idols. And none of us do that, literally. So we have to have the sermons of, but you could make your kids' sports an idol, or you can make this an idol, or something like that. So it's good application, whatever. We have to be careful about putting other things ahead of God, you know. Kids' sports, me talking to myself, right? So, all right, so what's going to happen to these two targets? Kevin, you can see them, right? 2,
Yeah.
13, 18, and 2, 5.
All right, so I will utterly consume all things from off the land, saith the Lord. Scrolling down to 13. Therefore their goods shall become a booty, and their houses a desolation. They shall also build houses, but not inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards, but not drink the wine thereof. Scrolling down to verse 18. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy. For he shall make even a speedy riddance of all them that dwell in the land. And going to 2:5. Woe unto the inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, the land of the Philistines. I will even destroy thee, that there shall be no inhabitant.
Okay, he's going to utterly destroy, consume, wipe out all of this, all of that. Tom?
Yeah, Isaiah 13:9. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate.
Lay the land desolate.
And he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it.
Okay, so
So
both
that's
of
why
these.
sinners is a reference to the people. It's not like Jews and Gentiles sinners. It's just
The inhabitants of that nation.
correct.
Okay. The second one that Kevin read, at some point, we'll probably come back to that 13, because you get some of that. We're going to hit that heavy in the latter part of Isaiah, the 60s. It'll be sometime next year. That talking about they would build a house and yet somebody else would inhabit it. Or they would make this vineyard and not be able to profit from the vineyard. Somebody else would be drinking the wine of that vineyard. You see that more often, and it's really clear in the back half of Isaiah what's going on there. So both of them are going to be destroyed. 1:7 and 13:6. Isaiah 13:6. Kevin first.
Back to 1:7. Hold thy peace at the presence of the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is at hand, for the Lord hath prepared a sacrifice, he hath bid his guests.
Yeah, and then Isaiah 13:6. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. Verse 8.
And it shall come to pass in the day of the Lord's sacrifice, that I will punish the princes and the king's children, and all such as are clothed with strange apparel.
Tom?
14:21. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities.
And you said, read yours again, Kevin? Sorry.
And it shall come to pass in the day of the Lord's sacrifice, that I will punish the princes and the king's children.
Okay, that's enough. The princes and the king's children. Tom's, if y'all remember when we set up the RSV version, and we had the big long thing against the king of Babylon, what Tom read was in that big long poetry piece or whatever. It's in the middle of that. He's talking against the king of Babylon. Zephaniah is talking against the king of Israel. Right? Hey, your children, you king of the Jews, your children are going to be wiped out. Hey, you king of Babylon, your children are going to be wiped out. This is copy and paste, guys. It's saying the same thing in every one of these verses. The gate. Now this one's a little bit different because it uses a different name, but you still get the idea. 1:10.
And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that there shall be the noise of a cry from the fish gate, and a howling from the second, and a great crashing from the hills.
And Tom, Isaiah 13:2.
Lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles.
Okay, that fish gate. When you start studying, what was the fish gate? What's the fish gate? It's this big prominent gate into Jerusalem. Okay, same thing. It's saying the same thing. Okay. This is the big one. This is a big one that I harp on a lot. You see it everywhere in the Bible. It starts in Deuteronomy. That's when they first start getting the, hey, I'm going to send you strangers from afar to destroy you. 3:8.
Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, and until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them mine indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy.
I will gather all the nations together as the weapon of my fierce indignation to destroy the Jews.
Isaiah 13:5. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land.
Same thing. I'm going to bring in all these armies, nations from afar, as the weapon of my indignation, the instrument of my wrath, to destroy Jerusalem and mystical Babylon, which I'm saying is Jerusalem. All right? Now, Zephaniah is a little more complicated because he has the upcoming immediate destruction. Don't discount that. That's also a factor in this. All right? But let's keep going. Gold and silver won't say. We kind of already read this one, but we were focusing on something else. 1:18.
Down. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath. But the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of his jealousy, for he shall make even a speedy riddance of all them that dwell in the land.
13, 17?
Yeah, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it.
You can't buy them off. They don't care. They're going to kill you. Right? Same thing. So this is all part of the same warning here. Anybody got any comments on any of this before I change the slide?
Zephaniah 1:8, who or what is the sacrifice? The Lord's sacrifice. Do they have the Lord's sacrifice?
I saw that and I wondered about that. I did not focus on it because it's not a Zephaniah class. But I asked the same question. Are they his sacrifice? Or is this talking about, in some weird way, Christ? I don't know. I did not dig into it because it did not parallel. Right? So that's not the part I focused on. There were like two things in Zephaniah that triggered my mind to, that's interesting, I want to know more. That was one of the two. I can't remember what the other one was. But I think excellent question. Anybody got any thoughts on that before we move on?
Well, clearly contemporaneous from the time he gets in the passage. So whenever Zephaniah is talking about, is a parallel reference to it is the day of the Lord's sacrifice. So, I mean, like whatever Zephaniah is talking about, which I think is the first century, is the destruction of Jerusalem. That day of the Lord's sacrifice is part of that.
Okay.
So the day of the Lord and the day of the Lord's sacrifice.
So what do you think the sacrifice is? Do you think it's the Jewish people, his children, or do you think it's just some weird way it's Christ?
I don't have much to, other than just a first passage. It looks to me like at first blush I would guess it's Christ.
Is that what you think?
I would just, that's what struck me, but I didn't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that.
I can definitely look into it. When I asked for experts on Zephaniah, I did not raise my hand. So we could definitely look into that, but yeah, it did pique my interest too when I read it. I'm like, that's interesting, because I thought it might have been a reference to Christ, but it's not really for the purpose of the class. So I was like, nope, I got way too much to get going here. Any other stuff on this slide before we move on? Nope. Okay. All right, slide 2, continue on. I will destroy all these oppressor names. So don't read these. There's nothing to read on point 8. We're not going to say I'll read tons of chapters. But in the middle here of Zephaniah, just like in the middle of Isaiah, not really the middle of the first half of Isaiah, he starts naming off some of the different Ammon, Moab, Edom, all of that kind of stuff. He starts saying, hey, I think Egypt might be in there, I can't remember. He starts listing off all of the enemies of God's people, of God himself, really. And Isaiah does the same thing. It's just Zephaniah's a way, way, way shorter book. All right, not a ton to compare there. This doesn't make or break the case one way or the other. All right, the oppressive city, 3:1. Kevin, Zephaniah 3:1.
3:1. Woe to her that is filthy and polluted, to the oppressing city.
That's Jerusalem. Okay? Jerusalem was oppressing. Babylon was oppressing God's people. Egypt had earlier been oppressing God's people. Assyria at one point, kind of, had been oppressing God's people. But they were captive in Egypt. They were captive in Babylon. They were not captive in Assyria. At least the Judah part. The Jerusalem part, I need to be very specific, because some of them did end up going into captivity from Judah. 14:2.
14:2. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors.
Okay? So, in 14:2, we spent a lot of time on that verse. That's a very, very strong verse to say Isaiah is talking about the first century. In both of these instances, the oppressors of God's people are being dealt with. Okay? More of the same event, the same language is happening there. The language one. This one is a little fun to me, and I think at some point we get into it a little bit more. But Kevin, read 3:9 there.
For then I will turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent.
Okay, let's talk about this a second before Tom reads this. What are y'all's thoughts on that? When you hear that, Kevin, read it again real quick.
For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent.
What's the first thing y'all think of?
I'll just say the day of.
The day of Pentecost?
Yeah, the first gospel sermon.
The first gospel sermon?
Yeah.
But I agree. Anybody else got any thoughts on that? The first thing that I think of is, if they're coming out of Babylonian captivity that they're about to go into here from Zephaniah, and they come out of it 80 years later, something like that, after this prophecy is written, does he give them a new language? Does he give them a pure language? No. It's the same language. It's the same law. It's the same everything. Nothing changes. Right? It's not this big wow new thing that they get in 539 BC or 458 or whenever they actually left Babylon.
Does it have anything to do with the remnant?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hold on. We'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
You're exactly right.
There we go.
You're exactly right. The word remnant, you're almost to the word remnant. I don't know if it's up here, but I read. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We will read it.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And you already know from digging through Paul's writings where he's saying, hey, remember when Isaiah said this? Remember when Isaiah was talking about the remnant? He meant us. This is being fulfilled today. Back in Paul's time, back in the first century. So that remnant should immediately trigger you first century. Now it's this type antitype, so there was a remnant that came out of Babylonian captivity, but that it's really not what he's focused on. We're getting there. So this pure language, and we will hit this. Oh, I remember where it is. It's in the Burden of Egypt, and it's a fun little thing that you stumble upon that you're like, that has to be first century. It makes no sense for it to be some Burden of Egypt thing. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't worry about it yet. But this little language thing is very fun. And you have New Testament cross-references for it.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay?
My understanding is before Babylonian captivity, everything was Hebrew. Hebrew, everything Hebrew. They go into Babylonian captivity, and the Hebrew language kind of gets mashed up with some other local things, and we've got Aramaic.
Okay?
And that's kind of what it is. Aramaic is like 90-95% the same as Hebrew, but it's impure.
Semitic language,
It's
they can all
impure.
understand it.
It's sort of like Creole English or something.
No, I get it. Yeah.
I don't know if that plays in here or not, but that's kind of what comes to mind with this pure and impure language. If they're thinking literally, if it's metaphorical, then that doesn't necessarily matter.
So what would be the pure language?
Hebrew.
You're going backwards, right? To come out with this slang, this offshoot dialect that got tainted by Aramaic, if that's what this verse is talking about, you're going from the pure to the impure. You're going backwards. You're going the wrong direction. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't look like you do.
I would think it's like going from Hebrew pure to Aramaic impure and then back to Hebrew.
Oh, so when do they go back to Hebrew? When do they go back pure?
I'm not sure that they do.
Right.
Right.
That's what I say.
And I'm not 100% sure, but I think that from the time they pick up Aramaic, they kind of continue with it. So, but there's like Ezra, I think, is written in Aramaic, and a couple of the
So let me stop you because I know the answer to this.
Okay, go ahead.
Just because of further on down the line we're on slide 165. I think the answer to this is on like slide 198 or something.
Okay.
It's not what we're covering tonight. We will get back to this. It's a fun one to me. Kevin, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was looking up the Strong's lexicon because that's what I do now.
I've ruined you.
So if it's going back to if the idea is going back to language with the idea that the law was passed down orally, maybe there's a connection back to a pure law.
Very much so. Very correct, except it's not the old law.
Because again, that goes back to the reason for having the law in the first place, because the law itself was corrupted. The pure law would obviate the need to have the law in the first place.
This is the book of Hebrews, guys. The more perfect sacrifice, the more perfect tabernacle, the pure version of everything, the antitype version of everything. It's exactly right. They're going to the pure law. That's this language. And again, I've got a lot more for it. I will teach that in a couple of weeks here. Right now, I'm just trying to show the parallels between the two. Okay, but that is a fun one. That was a fun one for me. And that was not one of the ones I'd ever picked up on before this class. But when I saw it, it was kind of easy. So, and y'all will get it too. All right, let's start over. Kevin, I want you to read 3:9 again, if you don't mind, please.
For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent.
Tom?
And then Isaiah 19:18. In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan, and swear to the Lord of hosts, one shall be called the city of destruction.
I'm not even going to touch 90% of that right now.
Just
Other
like-
than a bunch of Egyptians were going to be speaking this pure Canaanite language. If you try to think literally for a second, it gets very weird, very hard. But if you're saying, hey, the Gentiles were going to turn to Christianity, and what Kevin was saying, be a part of this new pure God's language,
Yeah.
the New Testament, it starts to get a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, one of the great cities of early Christendom was Alexandria, which is in Egypt.
Which is where supremacy was, according to not the Catholic Church, right? Because the Pope of Alexandria, the head bishop at that church, had supremacy over Rome for a couple of centuries. It wasn't until the late 500s that the guy in Rome kind of took over.
You still have a large Coptic Christian population in Egypt.
We have neighbors that are Egyptian, that are Christian. Yep. They're Egyptian, and they said something, and I looked at them, and they're like, no, we're Christian. I'm like,
Say, what in the world? are you
okay,
talking about?
cool. Tell me more about that, because I don't know a lot about that.
So I used to have a student that was a Coptic Christian. She had come from Egypt, and it's one of the oldest Christian groups, like continuous Christian groups that we know of. It was
Probably
like
dates back to the early Roman Empire.
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
It's like the Ethiopians too.
So
Yeah.
I just found this out recently. Coptic as a language is an interesting thing where Egypt ended up, in its ancient history, had forbidden any language other than Egyptian. And so Coptic emerges out of that time, where they're having to speak Egyptian, but a group of people that didn't know the Egyptian letters and hieroglyph symbols and stuff like that,
Mhm.
that they did, ended up using the Greek letters for Egyptian sounding words. So it'd be like taking English letters and trying to apply them to like Hebrew or Greek or something like that. That's what Coptic is.
Okay.
It's Egyptian with Greek letters, and it comes from a period of Egypt trying to crack down to make one language universal inside of Egypt. But it's interesting that.
Do you know the years of that? What years was that going on?
Like hundreds, like the 600s, 700s BC, something like that.
Oh, BC.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Well, it may not have been that far back, but it was, it was, the Greeks at the time were, you know, the Greek language was kind of coming down there and they were trying to push it back. I just happen to be studying the thing on Egypt right now.
And then eventually Koine Greek kind of takes over the world, right? Because that becomes the easy one. That's the one that everybody can talk in. It wasn't this high Greek. I understand there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, and my understanding is the Rosetta Stone.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, it wasn't, I'll turn it over to you, but it wasn't an easy crack the code. They had to first crack the code on Coptic, and then once they did it, it unlocked it.
Oh,
Because the Rosetta Stone has 3 languages on it. It has Greek, Coptic, and then hieroglyphs.
okay.
And they didn't, for a long time, they thought hieroglyphs were pictographic,
But there were not.
and they were not. It was an actual, like, phonetic language, just
Okay.
it wasn't one that they had seen before. And Coptic, finding the Rosetta Stone helped them figure out, because they all knew Greek, and then figuring out the Greek connection in Coptic allowed them to figure out the hieroglyph part.
Okay. When did they find the Rosetta Stone?
Where?
When?
Oh,
1797.
yeah, Napoleon found it actually.
That's really freaking
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and he brought it back
And
to
when
the-
was it made?
We don't know.
Nobody knows that.
Like,
Okay.
because you can't, it didn't say like etched in for, you know, it wasn't that nice, but you can't, they say now we have technology within the last 10 years that you can date
We should be able to know
etchings
before
in
we're dead.
stone, but it's a little iffy, like trying to
It's
date
not important,
etchings.
but
Yeah, but,
If I remember, it was kind of a temple thanks. Like the
Yeah.
temples tended to write monuments of thank you for the donations from the pharaohs and stuff like that. It's one of those.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. But enough to where you could crack the whole language.
right, because it was written in 3 languages.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the pure language. Tom, you read yours, correct? I think you did.
But yeah, the five cities of Egypt one, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. The poor. Now this one, guys, without even reading these, this should be triggering New Testament blessings. This is like Beatitudes type stuff, right? This is basic Christianity 101. This would be one of the first things you learn as a Christian. Isaiah 3:12. Sorry, Zephaniah 3:12.
I will also leave in the midst of thee an afflicted and poor people, and they shall trust in the name of the Lord.
Isaiah 14:30 and 32.
And the firstborn of the poor shall feed. And the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety. And I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. Skipping down to 32. What shall one then answer the messages of the nation? That the Lord hath founded Zion, and that the poor of his people shall trust in it.
Same thing, guys. Same thing. And you know from your own knowledge, way before you ever met me, this is Christianity. This is talking about Christianity. This is a New Testament thing. And when you go start, it's fascinating when you start learning about the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire, because it's the opposite of Judaism. Judaism was an elitist type religion. The Sanhedrin, the scribes, the Pharisees, the priests, all of that, all the big dogs, riches, temples, super rich, all that kind of stuff. Very, very, the way I look at it, very elitist. Very much, even when you read about all the Pharisees there, the story of the Good Samaritan, it's more the same thing, right? But when you start looking at what happened to Christianity and how it spread in the Roman Empire, it was none of the elites. I don't want to say none, that's too blanket. But it wasn't the elites that it was spreading through. It was spreading through the poor and the destitute and the slaves. And it just caught on like wildfire to them because they could now be elevated in status equal to these rich people that kept oppressing them. So when you start, I've watched a bunch of videos. This is how I learn history, and Kevin and Cody give it to me for that. They laugh when I say where I learned something.
We all start somewhere.
Yeah. But I watched it, and I thought it was very, very interesting on the spread of Christianity throughout the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century. And really by the time Constantine arrives, it had already got critical mass. It was not going to end after that. And that's when the elites, that's when Constantine says, yeah, I'm in.
Well, having a vision also helps with that too.
I don't know, talk about Constantine's visions. His mom was Christian.
Yeah,
That to me is the biggest factor.
well, I mean,
But
the
it had spread so much that it was okay for him to do it now. I think that's a big factor.
Yeah, but, I mean, God coming to him in a vision and showing him the Cairo and saying, put this on your battle standards and you'll win. If you don't, you'll lose. Anyway, all right.
No, I mean, yeah. All part of it, I think. We read these two. So the poor will flourish. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, they will inherit the kingdom of God, all that kind of stuff. Very basic 101 stuff. The enemy, the king of Israel, and one of these verses you have to be careful how you read it. But read Zephaniah 3:15 first.
All right. The Lord hath taken away thy judgments. He hath cast out thine enemy. The King of Israel, even the Lord, is in the midst of thee. Thou shalt not see evil any more.
That's one that you have to be careful how you read it, because if you delineate it at the wrong spot, it looks like the enemy is the king of Israel, God. That's not what it's saying. It says, hey, the enemy that's in the midst of you. I think that's talking about the king of Israel, right? The rulers of Israel. And then he says, the little colon there is different thought now. God is in you now. You're good. Okay, when I put a colon, I'm like, hey, this is a very, very bad use of English because it's the only thing I can think of right now. The light is colon green. I know that's wrong, but that's the way I think that anything after the colon is the answer to the what's before the colon. But that's not the way this is. He's saying, I'm going to give it to the enemy there, and I think if you back up and are reading the few prior verses in there in Zephaniah, I think it's talking about the rulers of the Jews. And we know the burden of against the king of Babylon in 13:4, but you could also read 14:4 as well. Take up this proverb against the king of Babylon.
Yeah, 13:4 says, the noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as a great people, the tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of the nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustered the host of the battle.
I guarantee you this is a typo. That's supposed to be 14:4.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's why I was like, that 13:4, I was like, that's not the same thing. Those verses don't sound anything alike.
Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, I have the oppressor seized.
Typo!
It's a slipped colon.
Okay, so take up against the rulers of the oppressors of God's people. Take this proverb up against the king of Babylon, the oppressors of God's people. Same thing. Strengthen your slack hands, knees, heart. We've got a little. Carol, will you read? You've got the NIV, right? Will you turn to Hebrews 12:12? Don't read it yet. But. All right, Zephaniah 3:16.
Zephaniah 3:16. In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, fear thou not, and to Zion, let not thine hands be slack.
Psalm 35:3-4.
Strengthen ye the weak hands, and confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with a vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you.
Harold.
Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees.
It's the same stuff. All three say exactly the same thing.
Where was she reading?
And what was the phrase? She was reading Hebrews 12:12.
Oh, okay.
NIV.
Yeah.
But again, NIV is good for what we're doing here. Kevin read a phrase that I like a lot. I've not fleshed this out completely and looked up every single instance of the 3 words "in that day." But every time I see that, that to me is a big clue that it's talking about the times of Christ. And we'll get into the last few verses here in just a second of Zephaniah. How much time do we have here? Oh, we're almost done. But in that day when all of this destruction is coming, strengthen the feeble knees, raise the weak hands. And then you have a New Testament cross-reference that says, hey, this is about to go down. Let's strengthen the feeble knees and let's raise the weak hands. Raise them up. Last one. The remnant saved back to their land, a name to the nations, and they will join you. Zephaniah 3:19 and 20.
Behold, at that time I will undo all that afflict thee, and I will save her that halteth, and gather her that was driven out. And I will get them praise and fame in every land where they have been put to shame. At that time will I bring you again, even in the time that I gather you. For I will make you a name and a praise among all the people of the earth, when I turn back your captivity before your eyes, saith the Lord.
Tom, let's read yours first, which again, we already know these verses well. But let's read yours first, and then we'll talk about this for a second.
Okay. Isaiah 14:1 and 2. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for the servants and housemaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors.
They're going to go back to this land. I say it's figurative land, because the type is not figurative. The type is literal. They're going back to Israel. But what he's saying is, I'm going to make you, and Zephaniah, the one Kevin read, is a little bit easier to understand. Read the last phrase of yours again, if you don't mind. Kevin?
Oh, beginning with when I turn back your captivity before your eyes?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. For I will make you.
Okay. Let's
Halfway through the verse.
halfway through the verse. For I will make you a name and a praise among all people of the earth.
Stop. All right. This is getting into this Isaiah theme of you are going to be the light unto the Gentiles. All right? Because in 6th century BC, we're not really that concerned with this yet. We're not trying to bring the Gentiles in yet. All right? Now, is there any sort of preparation? Is there so that they would know? Because when they came out of this Egyptian captivity, he did these things this certain way. The 10 plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea. He did all of these things, and you will see it a ton of times in the Old Testament, in the early Old Testament, so that they would know. Making that name known to everybody. And I think that is what is going on, and you will find hints of this in the book of Revelation as well, is that all of this great catastrophic stuff is happening, and the church was going to survive it. Christianity was going to survive it so that all the world would know. You will see that, a strong theme in 1 or 2 of the chapters there in the back half of Revelation.
Tom, did your version say aliens?
No.
See, in the NIV, it's aliens will join them and unite with the house of Jacob. And at one point, I nearly know you
You better
said...
not bring up drones.
No, no, you thought aliens were going to be the Gentiles.
Yeah, alien just means not from your place. You know, a foreigner. Somebody from another nation.
They're from China.
Somebody different.
So this remnant
Strangers.
is going to be saved out of this. And again, we've already very much connected the remnant to Paul to the first century, to the Messianic times. I'm going to read starting at verse 14. Well, no, I'm going to read starting at verse 16.
Which
Because Zephaniah 3.
Oh.
Because we're kind of at the end here. Let me do this first real quick. Y'all will like this, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. This is hard to follow. This is one that, get the slide, go make all of it, because there's 50 different things up here, and they all connect in different areas. I'm going to read the Zephaniah 2 version real quick. This is in the Assyria, the pronouncement against Assyria here. And he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make Nineveh a desolation, and dry like a wilderness, and flocks shall lie down in the midst of her, all the beasts of the nations, both the cormorant and the bittern shall lodge. And I looked up what these things were. They're just different scavenger birds, I think. Okay. I didn't know what they were.
They're big birds, but they are.
But they're big scavenger birds,
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
NIV says owls.
No,
The screech owl, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
Predator bird. In the upper lintels of it, I don't know what lintels means either, but their voice shall sing in the windows, these birds. Desolation shall be in the threshold, for he shall uncover the cedar work. This is the rejoicing city that dwelt carelessly, that said in her heart, I am, and there is none beside thee. How she has become a desolation, a place for beasts to lie down. Everyone that passeth by her shall hiss. Now look what he says in Isaiah 34, which we haven't gotten to yet, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But it's the same language. He's talking to Edom at that point. And this is, again, where, who comes from Edom?
Esau.
Edom comes from Esau.
Herod.
The Herods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay? I don't want to get into that right now. That's not what we're talking about. So in this judgment against Edom, and we're out of burdens by the time we get to Isaiah 34. That's Isaiah 13 through 23. But we're talking about Edom here a little bit, and he says the same stuff. Both the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it. It's the same language there. The owl also and the ravens shall dwell in it, and he shall stretch out upon it the line of confusion and the stones of emptiness. The wild beast of the desert will meet with the wild beast of the island. These are all your predators coming in to mess with Edom. And the satyr shall cry to his fellow, the screech owl shall rest in thee, and find for herself a place of rest. Now let's look at Babylon, Isaiah 13. But the wild beast of the desert shall lie there. Well, we just read that, right? We read that when it was talking about Edom. And their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. I think that's talking about the satyrs. And the owl shall dwell there, and the satyr shall dance there. Well, do we not just read that in Isaiah 34 when it's talking about Edom? Here we're talking about mystical Babylon. And the wild beast of the islands, a place for beasts to lie down, all the beasts of the nations. Here in Zephaniah, shall cry in their desolate houses. This place was becoming desolate. All of these things were going to lie down in these houses in the cedar work. And dragons in their pleasant palaces. I've already gone over what I think dragons are. And her time is near to come, because a dragon would be a ruler, a Gentile ruler, would be in a palace. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. Now let's look at Revelation. Finally getting back to a Revelation verse. It's been a while. Not as long, it's only one verse. And he cried with mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and become the habitation of devils. You've got these wild beasts, these devils, that becomes their habitation. The hold of every foul spirit, and unclean and hateful bird, which is a cormorant and a bittern. The language here is the same on all four of these passages. The reason I do this is kind of to show that, one, it's not really talking about the end of time, which a lot of people think, but two, that these other things are the types, the forerunners to the antitype Jerusalem, to this one. And then you could kind of compare this to that verse. I'm going to go back here. This Assyrian one. This is the rejoicing city that saith in her heart, I am, there is none beside me. It's not exactly the same in Revelation. It's not exactly the same in Lamentation, but you know Lamentation is talking about Jerusalem about to be destroyed, written by Jeremiah. How doth the city sit solitary that was full of people? How has she become a widow? She that was great amongst the nations and princes of the province, how has she become tributary? Revelation 18:7. How much she has glorified herself. She says, live deliciously, so how much she has glorified herself. How she said in her heart, I am, there is none beside me. That's saying the same thing. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I'm a queen. There's nobody like me. I'm a queen. I'm no widow. And he's saying, no, you're a widow. We've been over this. Tom's big lesson on the Septuagint. What did you call that thing? What was the big marriage thing?
Ketuvah.
Oh, the
Ketuvah.
Yeah.
When we spent it 4:1. She was going to become a widow, and later on in Isaiah, we hit this hard in the back half. She's going to become a widow. The kids are she's going to have that shame and reproach of not having the heirs. That's what's happening to her. Lamentation is Jerusalem. Revelation, Isaiah is first century Jerusalem. And then you have all of these other instances. I think they're all saying basically the same thing. I'm not going to have time to go through the end of Zephaniah because the bell just rang. But we kind of did a little bit anyway. You go through that. Like, let me read the cross references super fast if y'all want to write them down. Verse 16, Luke 12, verse 32, Hebrews 12:12, which we did read. Verse 17, 1 John 4, 14 through 19, and you can watch it on the video if you want to get them there. And then verse 20, you have Revelation 5:9, Romans 11, 25 and 26, and Luke 2, 30 through 32. You have a lot of New Testament cross-references to these verses that kind of help really pigeonhole Zephaniah into, okay, he's really concerned also with first century. Now, I think my personal belief is Zephaniah is a lot concerned with the type. Okay, because he is right before they go into, he's dealing with Manasseh and Josiah and them going into Babylon captivity, but everything applies also to first century as well. But then you get to this last part, and I think he stops talking about stuff that's contemporaneous with him and starts focusing on first century at that point.